So today I wanted to actually introduce a brand new segment to you guys, and this is going to be our Casual Corner. So since we started this channel about 4.5 years ago now, coming up on 5 years, there's been a very specific emphasis on the competitive scene, on the meta game, with Jason and his Metafix and his Meta Lab, and even when we play games, or pretty much a lot of what we have done with this channel has been really focused on the metagame. Even when we do our figure reviews, it's hard for Jason to take a step back from that and be like, hey, these are figures that'll be really awesome in casual play. So he's actually gotten a lot better on that. We're seeing that a lot more in our figure reviews, but that was something that a lot of people noted in our very early figure reviews, that there was such an emphasis on the competitive scene. Now, for any of you guys that have seen me out at events or have played against me or have heard me talk on our Patreon hangouts, I'm not a competitive player. My focus in the game has been mostly judging and knowing the rules, but also just kind of casually playing on the side whenever I get a chance to play this game, because I do love it as much as you guys do. So now that Dial It Up is kind of being pushed back with the rules changeover and going back to an emphasis on the more intricate rules and not coming out as often, we thought it was time to introduce a new segment to the show, hosted by me, that focuses more on the casual side. So with this, we're going to see top 10 lists or top 5 lists, scenario builds of how to do different funky scenarios for casual games, and kind of tournament reports anytime that I get a chance to go out and play and let you guys know how those did. So just a lot of like the other aspects of the game that doesn't include this high competitive level that Jason's really into and that he flourishes in. So for this first episode is just kind of an introduction. What I'm going to do for you guys is I'm going to take my Wolverine collection and show it off to you guys, because that is something that I've been doing since the beginning of this game, is collecting every piece of Wolverine that they've ever come out with. And that's another aspect of this casual side of the game, is collecting your favorite figures and having them on display, or whatever. You guys can see behind us, I have my Brainiac ship and a lot of other statues that are not Heroclix, and a lot of comics and magic, and you might be able to see our board games over there, or Gaming Central here. But yeah, one of the fun things with casual, and especially even if you have somebody first coming into the game, is, hey, collect the figures of the characters that you like, that you read the comics of. So Wolverine is huge Wolverine fan here, so I am going to turn this around to the camera and show off my 15 years worth of Wolverine figures. Alright guys, so I wanted to take you down to here, the map, just to show you guys off the Wolverine collection that I do have. Now, I have been collecting since the game first started, and with about one minor exception, technically two, I have every Wolverine that's been printed, that was created. All of the ones that I do have all of the tournament legal ones. There is one promo that I did not get that I will touch on later on. But starting off, when the game first started, we had an Infinity Challenge. Now, when the game first started, figures were actually done out in sets of REVs. So you'd get 3, there you go, a little focus there. You get 3 of each figure in a set. So here the yellow is your rookie, the middle there, the blue is your experienced, and the red is your veteran. So you can see here that like the points are different. They go up depending on the experience of the character itself. And if you can see a little bit of the stats are slightly different as well. So usually once you get to the vet, these are the highest stats you'll have, the longest dial, and they'll be worth the most points. So this is our Infinity Challenge. Now, back in the day, if you ever get a hand on these guys, the paint jobs on these are just absolutely hilarious. Looking back at Wolverine's face here, even just the detailing in the sculpts, because these were done by molds. I don't even know if they had like 3D computer software to be able to make these models back then. So, because we're talking all the way back to 2002 with these guys. So that was, and then with Infinity Challenge also came a unique. Now, like I said, with the RAV sets, the uniques were kind of like the super rares, or even in some cases more like the chases. Now he's missing his hand. I have his hand. It's in my case. It's just broken off. I'm gonna see if I can try to get it focused on his face. So this one's a little bit better with the painting, but even still, you can see the details are rough. This is the first set that they made, so you get a little rougher here. And then his points a little in between the veteran and the experience there, and same kind of stats and power line. So as you can tell, like 16 used to be a high defense, and 12 was a ridiculously high attack for this guy. And then continuing on with Infinity Challenge, there were 5 Wolverines in Infinity Challenge, the very first set. So this is the LE limited edition prize Wolverine. You can see the paint on his claws are mixing in with the paint from his his glove there, and that face. Oh my gosh, his teeth. Just hilarious. So he's even less points than the veteran, but he's the only one that came with charge, but then had a super low defense to go with it. Okay, so the next set that we go on to is Clobbering Time, and once again we're going to have these RAV setups here. Now this was Logan. So he went from being Wolverine to Logan, and you'll see the sculpt here where he's just got his leather jacket, his cowboy hat, and just his claws popped out on this one side. Now you'll notice that I do actually have 2 rookies here. This was one of the first variant Clix. There's a bunch of like urban legends as to why there was a variant here. If you notice, it's hard to see. I'm gonna see if I can focus in on this for you guys. There. This one is smoking a cigar. Now I was only ever able to track down the rookie smoking the cigar. I wasn't able to confirm whether or not there was a version of the experience in veteran, but every time I've gone through looking for it and talked to people that were playing at the time, nobody remembers there being a veteran or experienced version of him smoking the cigar. Everybody only ever had the rookie. So there may be 2 mysterious Wolverines out there that I have never seen or come across or heard whether they exist. If you guys know if they exist, that'd be awesome to let me know. But yeah, so fun little variant there where he's smoking his cigar. And so the next set they came out with was Explosion. This is the first set we don't have an REV of Wolverine. We just have a unique, and it is Weapon X. Now, this is one of the cooler sculpts they came out with right in the beginning, as it got a lot of really cool detail of him wearing that headgear from the Weapon X facility, and the program and all of the wires going through him and everything. You can see the rippling in his muscles. This is one of my favorite sculpts from the very beginning. It was really, really well done. The figure itself, I mean, it's a standard Wolverine pretty much at the time, because we didn't have traits or special powers or anything like that. Wolverine got like stealth and claws and toughness and battle fury, and that was pretty much all he ever got out of him. I mean, we're looking at an opening click here with 14 defense. This was actually, that wasn't bad. That didn't mean he was going to die, because most opening attacks were like 8 or 9. So after that set, we had Critical Mass, I believe, was the set here. And we have Patch. For those of you unfamiliar with it, Patch was an alias that Wolverine went under when everybody thought that the X-Men were dead. They were all hiding out in Australia, and Wolverine went to Madripoor in Japan and took over some criminal underground stuff there with the Princess Bar. So we've got him with his patch. The experience looks a little bit better sculpt-wise or paint-wise. So as you can tell, like, we're still getting the blades, toughness, stealth. I do believe this one actually got perplex at one point, which was very weird for Wolverine to have perplex. But yeah, so that's the next one. And then at one point in between sets, they came out with like a sort of relaunch as the trying to get interest back in. Now these guys are from Universe. If you'll notice, they are actually the experienced Wolverine from Infinity Challenge. Same sculpt, same dial, same points, everything like that. So one of them, this guy here, is actually from the starter set, which is why his points are a little bit off, and he's number 2. And then this guy here is actually from the set itself. This is a direct reprint of the experience, and I don't have the rookie or the veteran from Universe, but because they were direct reprints and nothing, I didn't go out of my way to recollect them because I already had a version of them from Infinity Challenge, because they are direct reprints. They were just, basically they took really popular characters from the first 3 sets, so Infinity Challenge, Claw Ring Time, and Explosion, and reprinted the most popular ones in this Universe in between sort of set. So after that, we ended up getting Ultimates. So this was a time where the Ultimate comics had just recently come out and they were really, really popular, and so we got a set based off of them. So this is the Ultimate Wolverine. This sculpt was probably my most hated sculpt. He looks cool, but if you notice the way that these dials are set up, he was the most impossible to turn because there was no like solid base here to turn him on. And more often than not, Wolverines were missing their topper because this is actually really like thin moldable plastic, like it's really soft, and he came out of this base really, really easily. So he broke very easily. Now, if you'll notice, the one cool thing about these ones is that like the rookie has the Brotherhood of Evil team ability, because at the beginning of the comics, he was working for the Brotherhood and he was infiltrating the X-Men on Magneto's orders. And then once you get further in, he had, this is actually the Ultimate X-Men team ability. They came out with a brand new team ability for this set. It got discontinued at one point. They stopped. I think this was the only set that ever actually used the team ability. And it was basically, you got to choose someone on your opponent's team, and then everybody with that team ability got +1 attack when attacking that person or something like that. It wasn't a very well used team ability, and we only ever saw it a few times. And then for that guy, he also has the Ellie, James Howlett. So this is at the time in the comics where it actually just got released or revealed that Wolverine's real name was James Howlett, and he ended up in the Ultimate comics using that name as well. So you see, this is also the first time we're going to see Impervious on Wolverine with a 14 defense. So they're like, okay, he can slough off some damage, but, you know, we're going to make it really easy for you to hit him. So after that, we had, what set was this? Mutant Mayhem. And this is my lovingly known as the Pirate Wolverine. This is at a time in the comics where Magneto had taken the adamantium out of Wolverine's system, so it's hard to tell, but they're like, oh look, these are bone claws. I think the Ellie is a little bit better at showing that. These are supposed to be his bone claws. This is when Wolverine went savage because they discovered that at the time that removing the adamantium was actually like poisoning his body, and it kept his all of his powers at bay. And so without the adamantium, his powers went haywire, and he basically went savage. He lost his nose. Like, they started drawing him really, really weird, which is where this bandana thing comes in. So he's not actually a pirate, but this is the Wolverine that I always called Pirate Wolverine. And then this is the LE is just called Logan. Okay, so the next set was actually the Fantastic Forces. Now this one was interesting because this is Wolverine. Now he's named Wolverine, but he's based off of Colonel Logan from the Days of Future Past set, where you'll see him with, he's got the white streaks in his hair, and his jacket's a little more beat up, and he's wearing a gun, which is funny because he still had no range. And his stats are a little bit better, but still typical. Now we're getting charge. Like, they swapped him between charge and stealth, and always had blades, always had toughness. Now this guy here, this purple ring, was a promo. Now this was at a time where they started giving out, or started doing pre-releases for sets. And as a participation prize, where from going to these pre-releases, they would give you one of these promos. Now the promos were usually a direct reprint of one of the uniques from the set. And and it was kind of a toss-up as to which one. Not everybody got a Wolverine, but hey, somebody got a Wolverine, somebody got a Mystique, someone got this, whatever. So I managed to get myself the Wolverine one for these promo sets here. And then after that, we have this guy. Now you'll notice he has the Shield Team ability, and he's just wearing a white t-shirt and shorts, and he's got that gun again. So very similar, but not quite exact sculpt as the Colonel Logan. This guy came from Armor Wars. Now, this is actually Wolverine from House of M, as he's working as part of the Red Guard, which is why he actually gets range for that gun that he has holstered. Now, later in his dial, he does get Battle Fury, so that he can't use his gun. But yeah, so he starts off with blades and not much else, because they kind of want you to be like, hey, look, we gave Wolverine range for the first time. Go shoot people. And then, of course, we have the purple ringed guy from the pre-release. Exact duplicate, even as the same collector number, but the purple ring were not tournament legal. And then we have a fun pair here. Another set of purple ring guys, same sculpt as the Armor Wars. They actually even have the Armor Wars collector symbol, but different collector numbers, because these were free comic book day giveaway promos. So if you actually look, we'll spin them around to the back. This one is wearing a WizKids t-shirt. And then this guy is wearing let's see if I can focus on it. Focus. Focus. A I Heart Heroclix. Can't get it to focus. There it is. An I Heart Heroclix t-shirt. So these were given out as free comic book day promos. And then the next time we saw our Wolverine here was, this is Sinister. So again, we're getting the brown suit Wolverine that we hadn't seen since Infinity Challenge, actually. So we got him, and he's just kind of coming off. A lot of sculpts with Wolverine, you're not going to get anything different or dynamic. He's kind of just there brandishing his claws. Like, they put him in slightly different poses. Sometimes he's lunging forward, sometimes he's just kind of standing back, sometimes he's hunched down. But they don't really, like, it's not a character you can really go all out on. And then once again, we've got the pre-release. I went to a lot of pre-releases at this time. So once again, the pre-release Wolverine there to go with these guys. Let's get them all back in my box. Now this is almost about a year or so later, we have actual Colonel Logan. So it's the exact same sculpt as the Fantastic Forces guys, but he came from the Danger Room set, which was a small little set that came with a Sentinel, Wolverine, and the Hound, which is actually Rachel Summers. So you can say he's a little bit different. He does have that range for the gun that he has there. But then he also has Close Combat Expert, which is like the first time, if I recall correctly, first time Wolverine's ever been given that power, where instead of giving him his blades, they gave him Close Combat Expert, and instead of toughness, he got super senses, because this was supposed to show an older, more run-down Wolverine, rather than the in-your-face fighting Wolverine that we're used to seeing. At least that's what they were trying to represent with this sculpt, and they still have some issues with the faces. And then we actually had a time where we didn't see Wolverine for a little bit, but he popped up again in Supernova. So this is actually the next set. I'll talk about that in a bit. This is the next set. This is Supernova Wolverine. Now, you'll notice it has a gold ring. Now, this wasn't an LE like all the other gold rings I showed you. This was one of the very first chases in Heroclix, and they didn't get brought back until more modern day Heroclix, but he was very, very hard to track down because at the time, a brick was actually like 15 boosters or something. So a case was something like 30 boosters, and he was like 1 in every 5 cases or something. And there were 3 other chases. So it wasn't necessarily just him. It were 3 other chases that were really, really rare to track down. At the time, they were going for about $200 to $250 per figure. Now nowadays that doesn't sound like too much. We see chases and convention exclusives get up that high all the time, but at the time this was unprecedented. Like before that, a figure going up to like $200 was like only Galactus had only ever made it that high. Now, this guy is actually from Heroclix. So if you see, what we're used to here, we're seeing BlazeClaw's fangs and willpower, and it turns into like charge, steel energy, and combat reflexes. But this guy was also made as a cross promotion for the game Heroclix. So he came with his own card. Now at the time, Heroclix didn't have a universal pack. Every character had its own character card. Now this actually is a precursor to when Heroclix themselves got actual cards. So this is the first Wolverine to have a card because it's for a different game. Now I'll show you the symbols at the top there because Heroclix had slightly different symbols. And then just looking at like his charge is actually when this monster frenzies, modifies its speed by +2. Frenzy was once you had killed somebody, you were allowed to move and attack. So it's actually possible for everybody in Heroclix to get move and attack. And then one hand was slash. If this attack succeeds, roll a d6 before dealing damage, replace this monster. So that is a BlazeClaw's fangs. And then same with feast. If the attack deals 1 damage, heal this monster of 1 damage. So that is like a steel energy. One of the weird things about Heroclix though is where we'll see acceleration on green and slash on red and feast in black. There could have been a character that would have a black attack that meant something else, which is why one of the character cards were really important. And then we have more here determined. This character is not vulnerable when is blooded and has 2 action tokens. So that was another rule that was specific to Heroclix. And then modifies the reflexes are just like combat reflexes. So this is a fun little guy to add in. And he wasn't that powerful when you put him up against other Heroclix either. And then the next time we saw Wolverine here was, what are we looking at here? Mutations and Monsters, I believe was the set. Now this is the second time we see Zombie Wolverine. I didn't mention that was Zombie Wolverine from the Marvel Zombies storyline. Now this is the next time we see him, and he is now Cosmic Wolverine. Wolverine has power cosmic, guys. And we're looking at Running Shot, Psychic Blast, Exploit Weakness, because this is part of the zombies once they ate Galactus and gained his powers. So that's why Wolverine is wearing Galactus' outfit. Now you'll notice he's on a smoke bubble here. This is actually a mod. He would have been on a flight stand, which is actually these wonderful, wonderful things here that broke all the time. And they had a mechanic all to their own, and they were wonderful. So I broke it off, and I took a smoke cloud from another character and then put them all together because I was sick and tired of the flight stand breaking on me. So that's all of what I end up calling like my golden age. Now it's not golden age in the sense of actual Heroclix, but just golden age in my collection, as these are the old style before we switched over to the different types of dials and stuff. This was the older style of Heroclix. So these are all in their own separate case here. So now we get into the next, or like the Silver Age of Heroclix, where Heroclix were starting to come with cards and stuff like that, where that actually, that Wolverine, that Cosmic Wolverine, it was actually part of this age here. I'm a little focused on that, yeah. So the interesting thing about this is that once we got here with Monsters and Mutations, the set before this was Avengers, which was the introduction to the 5-figure booster, and we no longer had REV sets, and it was a big shift. We got cards, huge shift in the game, and we stopped seeing Wolverine every set. Up until that point, Wolverine was in every single Heroclix set. And then Avengers was the very first set there wasn't a Wolverine. So then we start seeing him a little more sporadically, and he started creeping up into the higher rarities, which for as a collector really sucked. So the next time we saw Wolverine was Web of Spider-Man. We have our X-Force Wolverine here. So he's got the red eyes and the gray and black suit Wolverine. And then also in this set we got an X-23 and Dakin. I have Dakin with me. And we got Dakin wearing his old brown suit for when he became part of the Dark Avengers. And he was the Dark Wolverine. So you've got, the only way you can really tell there is that it's got Dakin's tattoos. And then next we had Giant Size X-Men, which just brought out back our wonderful yellow suited Wolverine. He's a little more, you see these sculpts now kind of just have aged better. They're more dynamic, they're less clunky, the muscles are more smooth, the paint job's a little nicer. And then also in Giant Size X-Men, we had super rare Wolverine, and this is the Horseman of Apocalypse Death Wolverine. So you're seeing we're getting nicer sculpts, we're getting nicer painting, his eyes are where they should be, slightly, like, I don't know, I want to see more dynamic, but even still, like, we've seen this pose from Wolverine before. The only thing that's different is now he's holding a sword. So again, like I said, Wolverine doesn't get too many of those, like, oh my gosh, this sculpt is fantastic sort of sculpts to him. And then to finish off Giant Size X-Men, this is probably the most you're going to see out of that is our fastball special here with Colossus and Wolverine, and he was a chase here. So he's just kind of perched up. This one's awesome. You actually see Xavier Institute there. So this is probably the most dynamic Wolverine you're gonna see, and he's with Colossus. So this is from the Captain America set, and he's pretty cool here. He has like these countdown clicks where he actually starts the beginning of the game. He starts in your starting area, and each turn you click him, and then by the time it counts down, he's like, oh, now he's actually there. So you're supposed to open him up. Oh, he's broken out of his tube. Now he can come attack. So this is the next time we see Weapon X in all of his glory, stuck in his tube. He was not a great figure. And the fact that it took you 4 turns to even get him as a playable figure. It was a cool mechanic. It was interesting. They had a Cap and Ice from this set that did the same thing. But in the end, he just becomes a cool piece to look at rather than actually play. Well, the next set we get is the Incredible Hulk. And this is it's an interesting Wolverine here because he has the Fantastic Four team ability. So it was at the time that he was... Now, this isn't Fantastic Four like Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman and Human Torch and the Thing. He was doing more of a secondary roster. So it had other characters on it at the time, and he was kind of the de facto leader, but didn't really want to be because Wolverine didn't like leading. But he's got a cool little sculpt here where he's in the snow, and that's actually not supposed to be a footprint. He's supposed to be down here, glued into that spot. And it actually matched a Sabretooth from this set that also had him on a snow peak, and they were kind of facing each other. So that was actually pretty cool that they made the sculpts similar to each other as they faced off. And then also from the Incredible Hulk set, we got Wolverine. Oh, I remember coming back into the game and trying to track this guy down was like the bane of my existence, because I had stopped collecting for a while, and then when I started collecting again, I found out that Wolverine was like, oh, they only make him a super rare or a chase now, so good luck with that. But yeah, these were cool green bases. So this was supposed to be like all of these heroes, but as Hulks. So they were the hulked out heroes, and this was Wolverine as a Hulk. They also had like a Namor and an Iceman and a Cyclops. They were all pretty cool sculpt. Again, like, even the pose, like, even though it's a cool sculpt, it's still like, oh look, it's Wolverine with his claws out, rawr. So next up we had the Galactic Guardians, and again we have a now this guy I think is actually, yeah, he's an LE. So he's not a chase, but still not the easiest to track down. And then we see him, this is the Fantastic Four one again, where he's actually in his Fantastic Four uniform. It's hard to see, but he does have the 4 on his chest where he's black and blue. This is pretty cool. So I think this actually may have come from an alternate, like a what if story, rather than a main line continuity for him. And then, oddly enough, in between these releases, we finally got the Giant Size X-Men Fast Forces. So you can tell that this one, compared to the original here, now we actually have the Oreo bases. So this is where we've got the nice spinning dial, where you can actually spin the dial, versus this. Now this was an overclick, which are even worse than the underclicks to try and move the dial along. And then getting back to an actual set, we have Chaos Wars. Now you'll notice the Chaos Wars sculpt is actually the exact same as the Galactic Guardian sculpt. He's just painted differently, where we get to see his brown costume again. And this, yeah. So there we go. And then we got Invulnerable. Ooh. They also at this point started making Wolverine like really high costed because of all of the powers they were giving him, where he used to be like around 60, 75 for all of the really early ones. And then we started heading up into closer to like the 100 range, which basically made him a lot harder to put on teams, because like he never really got a long dial with these higher point ranges. And then, oh, we have 10th anniversary. Now, 10th anniversary, we have our Weapon X again. Now, this was actually supposed to be, where did I put him? This was actually supposed to be like in celebration to this guy here. You can tell they're not actually the same dial or anything, but they're like, hey, look, let's have a throwback to the Weapon X. So it wasn't a full, like some of, like there was an Ultimates Thor that was like the exact same dial, and the KC Superman, which was the same dial, but you can tell here that this Wolverine is definitely, this Weapon X is definitely not the same dial. Now, he was an uncommon, which is really nice because we hadn't seen like a common rarity Wolverine in a while. And then of course we still had Chase, which was the Skrull Wolverine, where the Secret Invasion, he wasn't in the Secret Invasion set, but of course this is throwback to the Secret Invasion storyline where everybody was Skrulls, and he got the Skrull team ability along with the X-Men team ability. He's got shape change on his, which is always funny when they give Skrulls shape change on their opening click, because it's like, okay, roll for shape change, okay, roll for Skrull. And then there's this. So he does actually have a proper dial under there, and you can click them, but this extra piece here is was meant to go with a download app game, and these are just like touch centers to use on like an iPad or whatever tablet that you're using. So I know a lot of people have actually broken this part off of the base, but it's just kind of funny that these style here, like we didn't actually see any main sets in this kind of more kid-friendly style here, although they did decide to use the style for the Lone Ranger Clix, which I will never understand that decision, but hey, to each their own, right? So he's actually a fairly decent Wolverine when it comes down to it, and he has range. I don't get it. But yeah, like, it wasn't a horrible dial. It's just on this sculpt I've never actually played him. And then next we got Fear itself. So this is the Worthy Wolverine, where he got a suit of armor. And you can tell his claws there are actually glowing. And he's got all these funky spikes all over him. It was like a poison armor kind of thing. It was interesting. He had a lot of I had a lot of fun playing him. I actually played a lot of this, but as you can see, I was talking about with the point values going up. This was a super rare, if I remember correctly. I don't remember if there were actually any chases in that set. So super rares were like the highest to try and get, because this was our first storyline OP kit with the Fear itself. Or at least, sorry, the first one I played, because before that we had No Man's Land and Infinity Gauntlet, but this was the first time we got a set specifically made for a storyline OP. And then we got Wolverine and the X-Men, where he got his own set, and there were only 2 versions of him in the set, and one of them wasn't actually in the set. It was from the gravity feed, where they had a primer gravity feed where you got 10 redials of figures that were in the set. It's also at the time that we had click bases, switch clicks, and you'll notice that my main set Wolverine doesn't have his sculpt on it because he's actually sitting on my team base. But I prefer the gravity feed one over the other one, the one 113 points. But again, having Wolverine 113 points, he feels like a point sink. He never felt like he lived up to that, putting that much points into him. Which was nice when the next time we saw him was AVX. Once again, another switch click here. And then this went on the X-Men or Avengers team base. I believe he could go on both, as he does have both team abilities. Now, he had 175 points, 125 points, and 75 points, but to be brutally honest, he was only really ever good on his 75 point line, where you got charge, blades, exploit, toughness, and I think he was like 4 or 5 clicks long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah. And he's got some regen in there at the end and in the middle. Like, this was a very solid 75 points for this Wolverine, and I fell in love with it because it went back to like the Wolverines that I started playing at the beginning of the game, where like he didn't have a long dial, but he was low pointed and he did damage, and that's what you want out of a Wolverine. You don't want like a 12 click Wolverine that just takes forever and takes up too much points on your team. And then the next set we got was Deadpool. And then of course we saw another super rare Wolverine. Now this one came with his daughter, clone, sister, person, genetic double. She's classified as his daughter now in comics, but she's his clone. This is actually a really, really awesome click, where they were super, super stealthy in the fact that they didn't actually have stealth, but if any lines of fire drawn to them like went through unhindered terrain, like you couldn't target them. Like, they were really cool, like not targeted, and they came with leadership, and they were, let's see if we can get it in there. No, they were 168 points. So as cool as they were, like, this wasn't somebody you're really gonna put on a 300 point team. They did have the duo split and merge thing, but at the time, the only other modern X-23 came from that set, and it was the Cosmic X-23, and at 100 points. So if you're popping her out at 100 points, you don't like have enough points to bring out a Wolverine at that time at Modern, as I was saying, that they kept overcosting Wolverines. So it didn't really work for split and merge for these guys, but they were still a really cool figure, pretty cool sculpt. He's still just Wolverine bent over, claws out, but having him there with X-23 was pretty cool. And then the other Wolverine that came from the Deadpool set was this guy. Now this guy was awesome. So this is Wolverine, Agent of Hydra. He comes from an Exiles comic book, where in one of the worlds that they came to, Susan Storm was actually the head of Hydra, and Wolverine was her lapdog, and she was basically mind controlling him at some point to do his bidding. It was a really interesting story. It got weird, but we got a really, really cool Wolverine out of it, and he was allowed to use the Hydra team ability at close combat instead of just at range. And again, we have leadership there with him, so, and the basic Hydra team ability. He's only 90 points, which actually was good at the time for a Wolverine. Still felt overcosted, but with everything that he did, it was a pretty cool Wolverine. And then next we had the Days of Future Past set. So here we have two different Wolverines. We had our past Wolverine, and at the time in the comics, he was wearing the orange or the brown costume. But again, this is the same sculpt as Wolverine in the X-Men. We're not really seeing too much different out of it. Now this guy is cool. This is our Return to Colonel Logan. Now he's not called Colonel Logan, he's called Wolverine. This is our Return to Colonel Logan. He's got an actual face there, and he's got that wall, that iconic wall from the cover of the Days of Future Past comic. The only thing he's missing there is a little shadow cat to be protecting. But yeah, this is actually my favorite Wolverine. I think this was the most comic accurate. My only big complaint is, again, we're looking at a severe amount of points put into this guy. He's 156 points. But every other click, he has an ability where at the beginning of the turn he heals a click, and then on the click where he's not healing, his damage power there, he gets +1 to his attack and damage for every opposing character that's adjacent to him. So if you throw this guy into a swarm, he's dealing a lot of damage to a lot of people, and then he'll just absorb it back, and then like every other click, he's just healing again. So he's a lot of fun to play. He's just way too many points. Then we got our convention exclusive Wolverines. I didn't think I'd see the day, but then they did it. So the first one that came out was the Old Man Logan, who, I'm very unfortunate, is just a horrible click. He's just so bad. He's 178 points, which is just way too much. He has an activation click of all things, because of course at the beginning of Old Man Logan he refuses to fight. He's like, no, I'm retired, I don't want to do that anymore. I killed too many people. And then you get him in, and he's got Invincible, which at the time was a very, very costly power. And like his dial just he gets phasing later on, like okay, so the story behind that is, like, I wish he was better, because I spent way too much money on this guy. This was before we were getting like nationals and WKOs and stuff in Canada, so we weren't going down to Origins, or I think actually it was Gen Con at the time, to get these convention exclusives, so we had to buy them online, and we didn't have enough people around us that were going down to get prizes for us. So when he just came out, I was like, oh no, it's the first convention exclusive Wolverine, I must have it, and I spent like $110, $120 on him, and then like 3 months later he was like everywhere, and he was $60. And like, so this is my biggest regret in my Wolverine collection, is this guy right here, because I spent way too much money on him, but at least he looks pretty. And now we're just gonna get a regular Old Man Logan in the upcoming X-Men First Class set. And then there's this guy. And this is Wolverine, Lord of the Vampires. Because that was a storyline. Again, he's just too many points. You don't want to spend 180 points on a Wolverine. He has a vampire dial, so there he can heal back up only through steel energy to back up. And even then, like, he still only has charge and impervious as King Vampire. So I think I've only ever played him once and, like, let him die because I'm like, I'm so angry at you. But at the time that this came out, he was a con in your store exclusive, which thankfully is a set of tournaments that got turned into the WKOs and were much more readily available for us. So I missed out on winning him at a Canadian Nationals Battle Royale. And then Jason ended up trading his King Thor for him, and I'm not happy that he did that, but I love him because he did that for me, so kind of a mixed bag on that one, but Vampire Wolverine, rawr! So now we're into actual modern day Wolverine with Uncanny X-Men. We had a common and an uncommon. It's nice to see them again in just the regular rarity spots rather than chasing down con exclusives and chases. And these guys really benefited from the new point formula too, especially the 50-point guy, where it was just, again, so nice to see a Wolverine back at that point range. And he did decent too. Like, he was a good attacker. He did what he needed to do. Like, again, Wolverine's just not someone you want to spend a lot of points on. Now I say that, and then we also had a 114 point or 115 point Wolverine here. But yeah, like, he wasn't bad. He was good and sealed. He's okay to put on a team that you're not spending, or like a nice big X-Men team, but still Wolverine's just that guy you want to spend between 50 and 75 points for. But to top off that set, they had Weapon X. Now, of course, here I'm just showing you like a dead Sentinel hand. He's nice, a little Wolverine, indomitable, had good attack, did good damage, and he was called Weapon X because this came from the Age of Apocalypse set, where here's the actual figure. You see here he's missing his hand. He's in a nice kind of jumping position, decently painted face there. Now, when this guy was first getting pulled, a lot of people thought that the figure was broken. He's supposed to sit here on the hand. Now, he's actually intentionally loose because if you manage to also pull the Colossus from that set, he actually fits in Colossus's sculpt to make that fastball special. So I had heard tale of people that were actually gluing the Wolverine in place when they first got him because they thought he had broken off the sculpt without realizing that they had this fastball special going on. Now, we got lucky and we pulled both of these guys when we were first doing this set in our unboxings, so we knew that this was something that was happening, and it was one of the things that it was the first thing we posted after unboxing was like, hey guys, look at this amazing thing. And then we move on to our most recent Wolverines, and they are from Wolverine and the X-Force, or sorry, Deadpool and the X-Force here, where we're back to our X-Force stealthy Wolverine in his gray and black suit. Here is the stealth opening. Now, I wanted to actually bring down the card for this guy. So this is main set, and then you have Fast Forces. So they did different things, but still, I don't like the 100.1 as much as I like the 70.1. So I wanted to actually bring down his card not because of what's here at the front. This is actually kind of a throwback to a feat that we like to use on Wolverine called Automatic Regeneration, which allowed you to use regeneration as a free action. But I wanted to actually show you back here the significant appearance of this Clix. Legendary Heroclix promo figure 2002. Now, I did mention at the beginning of this that I am technically missing a Wolverine. I have all of the playable Wolverines that they made, or at least a copy of, because, like I said, the universe is a reprint of the original Wolverine from Infinity Challenge. But this, when the game first came out, there was a toy fair in 2002 where they handed out promotional figures of like Spider-Man, Daredevil, Hulk, Wolverine, I think Captain America, and Batman, Superman, that sort of thing, where they were trying to show people, hey, look at this game that's coming out. Check out these figures. This click dial base thing is the first time any game system has ever used something like this. Well, they had their Mage Knight and stuff, and their Mech Warrior, but they're like, hey, we're doing superheroes now. And there's a Wolverine that is actually just a reprint of, or at least would be printed later in Infinity Challenge as the veteran Wolverine. So same Clix, and it actually had the red ring. It had the, I'm trying to find it, veteran, sorry guys. It had the red ring, it had the set number and everything. So it looked exactly like this guy, but it was painted all black. Even his face and everything was painted all black and stuff, as a kind of a promotion, as, hey, look, we're making this. So if you actually look at the dial here, if I can get my dial, if I can get my dial in the right spot. I tried popping this out earlier. So you can look it up online too, is that these first 6 clicks here, because that's where we get into the special powers on the last 3, this first 6 clicks here are actually like the almost exact clicks of the original vet Wolverine here, with an exception on some of the numbers have gone up or down to try and, because this is something that's modern legal. So this is a modern Wolverine. So the old point formula or combat values didn't really work, but like the same power sets and everything, it goes exactly along as the very first Wolverine. So that, for me, that was really, really cool that they did this, where they're like, hey, remember that Wolverine that we got that only ever exists on the internet because we only made like 200 and everybody threw them out because they didn't know what Heroclix was? Yeah, well, let's remake that figure. So that was my Wolverine collection. I hope you guys had fun looking at all of my old figures and newer figures and all of the stuff that I had to go through to get all these figures. And welcome to the Casual Quarter, and we're going to try and get out episodes for this on a weekly basis, much like Jason's Metafix. And if you guys have any suggestions on what you would like to see out of the show, just let me know in the comments down below, or if you guys want to say anything about my collection, I don't know. Share your collections, whatever you want, down below. We'll see you guys next time in the Casual Quarter.